The boardroom smelled like power, polished mahogany, imported cologne, fresh espresso brewing in the executive lounge just outside. It wasn't just a meeting, it was a ritual of dominance. 12 leather chairs, 11 men in suits, one empty seat. And then Mandy walked in. No one really noticed, or maybe they did, but not in a way that mattered. To them, she was the person who refilled the pens, who printed the last-minute agendas, just the secretary. But what they didn't realize was that Mandy Harris didn't just walk into the room, she stepped into the storm she'd been quietly preparing for 8 years. Nathan Carile didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. From the head of the table, he leaned back in his chair with that smug million-dollar smile, the kind CEOs wear when they're too used to winning and too blind to notice who's holding the cards. He tapped the contract binder Mandy had just handed him, barely glancing at it. Then he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mandy, you're a secretary, not a lawyer. I don't pay you to think." The words sliced through the room like a paper cut across dignity. A few chuckles followed. Not loud, but sharp. Not funny, just cruel. Someone at the table even whispered, "Ouch," as if amused. Mandy stood there holding her breath. She felt the burn rise up her neck, her ears hot, her jaw clenched so tight she thought it might crack. But she didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She simply nodded, because that was what they expected her to do. But inside her, something shifted. Not rage, not even pride, just a quiet, solid promise. This is the last time I let you underestimate me. Mandy didn't say a word. She simply gathered the remaining binders and stepped back like she always did. But this time, something was different. Not in what she said, but in what she didn't say. Her eyes didn't look down like before. They locked on Nathan's for a brief second longer than they should have. Not defiant, not aggressive, but sharp, like steel pulled from a velvet sheath. And in that moment, something subtle but seismic shifted in the room. No one noticed it, but the viewers, the ones watching this story unfold, they did. They saw it in the way Mandy's hands stopped trembling, in the calmness that wrapped itself around her posture like armor. She wasn't broken. She wasn't angry. She was calculating. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest, it's the one who says nothing but remembers everything. The office was quiet. Not the kind of quiet you get during lunch breaks. This was the stillness that only comes after 9 p.m. When the last elevator chime has faded and the cleaning crew becomes the only sign of life. Mandy sat at her desk, the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above her. No coffee, no copies, no tasks assigned, just a woman, and 500 pages of legal language that no one had bothered to read. She opened the contract binder again, this time not as the secretary filing it, but as the person who might just understand it better than anyone else in the building. Page by page she read. Clarity came slowly, like a fog lifting at dawn. Then she saw it, page 312, subsection D, dormant license clause. Her eyes narrowed. She read it again, then again. It couldn't be real. It sounded ridiculous. $1 to claim core software rights? But the clause was right there, not hidden, just ignored. Her heart started to beat harder, not from panic, but from something else. Recognition. This wasn't just a technicality. It was a live wire buried in the foundation of a $90 million deal, and now she was the only one who knew it existed. Mandy leaned back in her chair, eyes still locked on the clause. It wasn't complicated. In fact, it was shockingly simple. Dormant license clause, a provision buried in the acquisition contract, likely carried over from a deal made 2 decades ago, back when software wasn't the crown jewel it is now. It allowed a third party, any qualified individual or entity, to purchase the core software license of the company being acquired for $1 as long as they filed before the acquisition closed. It was designed as an emergency safeguard, a legal backdoor, something no one ever expected to be used, but no one had removed it. Not the lawyers, not the executives, not Nathan. It was still binding, still active, and still perfectly legal. Mandy's heart raced as the implications snapped into place like falling dominoes. If someone claimed that license, even for just $1, the entire $90 million deal would collapse. Because without the software license, the acquisition target couldn't legally operate in its primary market. The company Nathan was trying to buy would be worthless, and the one who filed the claim would hold the keys to the castle. $1, one form, one moment of courage. That's all it would take to rewrite the story. It was past midnight when Mandy hit print. The office was dark. The glow from her monitor lit her face, casting shadows across tired eyes, but her gaze was sharp, clear, like someone who had finally decided enough was enough. She pulled the printed claim form from the tray, then from her bag, a folded check for $1 already signed. She had written it earlier that evening, not in anger, not to get even, but because justice sometimes wears quieter shoes. This wasn't about humiliating Nathan. This wasn't about revenge. It was about proving to herself, most of all, that the truth, when seen clearly, could still win, even in a room that never looked her in the eye. She checked the form again, then placed it carefully into a legal envelope. Everything was ready. She still wore her navy blue blazer, the same one she wore every Tuesday, but tonight it felt different. Because underneath the silence and modest office wear, Mandy Harris was carrying a plan that could bring a $90 million empire to its knees. And all it took was a clause no one bothered to read and the courage to act on it. It was 12:47 p.m. Mandy stepped into a small notary office 2 blocks from her workplace, the kind of place most people walked past without noticing frosted glass windows, a ticking wall clock, and air that smelled like old ink and seriousness. Behind the counter sat a woman in her 60s, silver gray bun, reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain. She looked up as Mandy approached. Mandy placed the envelope on the counter. License claim, Form 17B, supporting documents inside, payment included. The notary opened the envelope. She pulled out the check. $1. She paused, looked at Mandy over the top of her glasses. $1? Her voice was dry, almost amused. Are you sure, sweetheart? Mandy didn't hesitate. More sure than I've ever been in my life. The woman raised an eyebrow, then gave a slow, knowing smile. She stamped the form with a heavy thunk. Then let's make it official. The sound echoed louder than it should have, like the quiet start of something no one saw coming. The door clicked shut behind her. She was back at her desk, back in the role they knew Mandy the secretary. The coffee machine gurgled. Printers whirred. Phones rang and got answered with the same practiced cheeriness. Mandy walked past the break room, smiled at someone from accounting, dropped off a folder in legal. No one blinked. No one noticed anything. And that was exactly what she needed. Because while the office moved like any ordinary Tuesday, Mandy had just planted a time bomb. Not one that would explode in fire or noise. No, this one ticked silently deep inside the heart of the company. Tucked in her bag was the stamped copy of the claim. Filed, verified, legally sound. She had played by every rule, every line, every comma. But unlike before, she wasn't just following orders anymore. She was following intent. The intent to be seen, to be heard, to make sure that next time someone said, "You're just the secretary," they'd remember the day a secretary brought a $90 million deal to its knees and smiled while doing it. It happened on the third morning, 9:15 a.m. The door to the executive wing slammed open. A lawyer from the acquisition firm suit, rumpled voice shaking, marched straight into Nathan Carile's office. No knock, no smile, just panic in polished shoes. Through the glass walls, Mandy could see Nathan rise from his chair, face hardening like granite. They spoke in hushed, frantic tones. Then the door shut. Minutes passed. By 10:30, 2 more lawyers arrived. By 11, the legal team was fully assembled in the boardroom. Whispers started slithering through the hallways. Something's wrong with the license. There's a legal freeze. Somebody filed a claim. Who? Nobody knew. But Mandy did. She sat at her desk, typing a scheduling email as if nothing had happened, her face calm, her breathing steady. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't even need to stand. Because when you've done everything by the book and you've buried your moves so cleanly in the rules, power speaks for itself. 5:03 p.m. The office lights flickered under the weight of another long day. Most people were packing up, stretching, laughing. Mandy's inbox pinged. Subject: Formal conduct inquiry. Immediate response required. She clicked it open. There it was, the accusation. You are being investigated for unauthorized interference with contractual proceedings related to the Hanover acquisition. The email was cold, professional, structured to look neutral. But Mandy had seen enough memos in her 8 years to know exactly what it meant. They were coming for her, trying to paint her as reckless, as a rogue actor, as someone who stepped out of line. She let out a slow breath. Then she smiled. Not wide, not cocky, but calm. Like someone who had expected this move 3 days ago, she forwarded the email to Attorney Evelyn Marks, subject, as anticipated, proceed. Because Mandy hadn't just filed a legal claim, she had prepared for the retaliation that would follow it. And when powerful men panic, they don't argue with facts. They attack the person who brings them. But this time, she had already put her armor on. 8:04 a.m., Mandy tapped the spacebar. Her monitor blinked awake, then froze. A red screen appeared. Access denied. Please contact IT. No warning, no explanation, just 3 words, meant to rattle her. Across the room, someone whispered. HR was already in a closed-door meeting. The vultures were circling. But Mandy didn't flinch, didn't blink. She simply reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder, the one her attorney had given her. Inside was a pre-drafted legal notice. Any retaliatory action taken against Miss Harris will trigger immediate legal escalation and be deemed unlawful workplace retaliation. She slid the folder into her lap, straightened her blazer, took a sip of coffee. They had made their move. Now it was her turn. 2 p.m. A quiet corner cafe 2 blocks from the office. No suits, no boardrooms, no tension in the air, just the clink of ceramic mugs and the low hum of jazz. Mandy sat across from Evelyn Marks, her attorney. Sharp, unshakable. The kind of woman who didn't talk unless it mattered, and when she spoke, people listened. Evelyn slid a folder across the table. "We're filing for preemptive legal protection," she said calmly. "If the company moves against you, they'll have to explain everything on public record." Mandy nodded. No dramatic gasp, no wide-eyed fear. She had expected this conversation, planned for it, 3 steps ahead, because retaliation wasn't just predictable, it was inevitable. But now it was also provable. Evelyn leaned in. "They're trying to scare you, Mandy, but fear only works on people who don't have a strategy." Mandy's lips curled into the smallest smile. "They thought I was playing checkers," she whispered. "I've been playing chess the whole time." Monday morning arrived. Same office, same hallway. But something had changed. The laughter, gone. The light jokes over coffee, muted. The executives who once smirked at Mandy's name now avoided eye contact. They turned their heads when she passed, pretended to check their phones, suddenly fascinated by floor tiles. In the HR department, files piled high, voices were hushed, doors closed a little too quickly. The legal team running on caffeine and panic. Someone whispered in the elevator, "She filed something, didn't she? I heard it's airtight. No one saw it coming." Nobody was laughing now. Not because Mandy had said anything, but because she didn't have to. She walked the halls like she always had. Same blazer, same hair pinned back, same quiet smile. But now that silence carried weight. She didn't need to yell or prove anything. They proved it for her the moment they stopped laughing. The call came just after lunch. "Mandy, this is Richard Clark. We need to talk." There was no anger in his voice, no forced politeness. Just calm authority, the kind that doesn't ask twice. By 2 p.m., she was seated across from him in a quiet, glass-walled conference room on the top floor of a building she rarely had reason to enter. Richard Clark was not like Nathan. No smugness, no performance. He listened, fully, without interruption. For the next 20 minutes, Mandy laid it out. The overlooked clause, the legal filing, the retaliation, the HR email, the system lockout, and the documentation. Every word was steady, professional, not bitter, not dramatic, just facts and folders to match. Richard said nothing for a long moment, then leaned back, steepling his hands. "You've put us in a difficult position," he said quietly. Mandy met his gaze, calm, unmoved. "No, sir," she replied. "Nathan did that. I followed the law." His eyes didn't flinch, and for the first time since this all began, Mandy felt heard. The room was still. The kind of stillness that follows truth, the kind no one dares interrupt. Richard Clark leaned forward slightly. His voice was measured, but not cold. "You're not wrong, Miss Harris." A pause. "Nathan is." He didn't say it for effect. He said it because he meant it. And with those 5 words, the atmosphere in the company began to shift. Not with announcements, not with fireworks, but with something quieter, stronger. People started noticing things. Not because Mandy raised her voice, but because her silence had started to carry weight. It spread, like a draft through old corridors, like the sound of a locked door slowly creaking open. And for the first time in 8 years, Mandy Harris wasn't overlooked. She was the pulse, the shift, the calm storm in the center of a corporate quake. 2:15 p.m., the door to the boardroom clicked shut. The air inside was clinical, cold, controlled. 12 board members sat in a perfect arc, hands folded, expressions unreadable. At one end sat Nathan Carile, jaw clenched, eyes fixed ahead, arms crossed like a fortress. At the opposite end sat Mandy Harris, not behind him, not outside the door, but at the table. In front of her lay a thick folder, labeled, tabbed, dated, a complete timeline, emails, filings, copies of the dormant license clause, and a transcript of the HR threats that followed. Facts, receipts. Unavoidable truth. Nathan tried to speak first, tried to spin, to shift blame to legal, to say she never should have had access. But the documents spoke louder than he ever could. Every excuse fell apart under the weight of Mandy's preparation. She didn't interrupt him. She didn't need to, because the longer he talked, the deeper he dug. And across that long, polished table, for the first time, they didn't just hear Mandy. They believed her. It ended without a bang. No press conference, no company-wide speech, no handshake in the lobby, just a silent vote. And then a single email. Effective immediately, Nathan Carile is placed on administrative leave pending internal review. That was it. By morning, his nameplate was gone, his office dark, blinds closed, no boxes carried out, no goodbye. People whispered, of course, but no one dared speak his name above a whisper. Because power, real power, rarely leaves with noise. It fades. And when it's gone, all that's left behind is a vacuum. And in that vacuum, for the first time in a very long time, Mandy Harris didn't feel small. She felt steady. Not victorious, just right. The offer came 2 days later. Richard Clark requested a one-on-one meeting. No assistants, no agenda. Just a quiet room, 2 chairs, and a cup of coffee he handed her himself. "We want you to stay," he said. "Not as a token, not as a gesture. We're creating a new position, Director of Strategy and Risk, and we want you in it." Mandy blinked. Not because she was unsure, but because she was measuring what this moment meant. This wasn't a promotion. It wasn't a prize. It was recognition for the years of invisible work, for reading what others skipped, for protecting the company when the CEO couldn't or wouldn't. She nodded slowly. "If I take it," she said, "I don't want to be a figurehead. I want a seat at the real table, and I want authority to act when others are too afraid to." Richard smiled. "Done." Mandy didn't smile back, not out of pride, but because she understood the weight of what she now carried. This wasn't about winning. It was about making sure no one like Nathan ever got to rule by arrogance again. Her name was on the door now. No gold plate, no glossy finish. Just Mandy Harris, Director Strategy and Risk, printed in plain black text on frosted glass. The office wasn't big. No view of the skyline, no corner walls or leather sofa, but it was quiet. And sometimes quiet is more powerful than square footage. Inside there were files, not about mergers or takeovers, but names, emails, notes from junior staff, the ones who stayed late, the ones who were always just something. And Mandy, she wasn't chasing credit anymore. She was listening to the assistants who were ignored, to the analysts too afraid to speak up, to the voices that once sounded like hers. She gave feedback. She cleared roadblocks. And when someone knocked on her door, nervous and unsure, she never looked at their title first. She looked at their eyes. Because once, not long ago, no one looked at hers. It wasn't a formal meeting. Just two people sitting across from each other in a conference room that had seen too many deals and too few moments of honesty. Richard Clark held a coffee cup in his hands. He didn't say much at first, just looked at Mandy with a quiet intensity, the kind of look that says, "I've watched everything and I understand now." Then gently, "You didn't just protect us from external risk." A pause. "You protected this company from itself." Mandy said nothing for a second, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she wanted to absorb the weight of that sentence. No one had ever said that to her before, not in 8 years, not once. She looked up and simply said, "Thank you, sir." Richard gave a small nod. No speeches, no long praise. Just mutual understanding between two people who both knew what it meant to carry something quietly. The hallway was the same, but she wasn't. As Mandy walked down the corridor, there were no cheers, no slow claps, no dramatic spotlight, just quiet footsteps on the same floor where she once walked like a shadow. Some nodded, some straightened up, some looked down ashamed they hadn't seen her sooner. But Mandy didn't need their recognition. Because today, she didn't walk like someone waiting to be noticed. She walked like someone who finally knew she had always belonged. Not because of her title. Not because someone gave her permission. But because she understood something powerful. You don't need a crown to lead. You need clarity and courage. And sometimes that's enough to shift an entire system. All it takes is one signature, $1, and one woman who refuses to be just anything. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They may not speak loudly, but they watch, they learn, and one day they move. And when they do, they don't just fight for themselves. They change the system for everyone who's ever been ignored, overlooked, or called just a. So the next time you feel small, remember Mandy's story. Power isn't about title. It's about knowing your worth and daring to act on it, even if the world thinks you're just a secretary. Be the one who signs the document that rewrites the ending. If this story stirred something inside you, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated, then you're not alone. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. Stories that remind us one signature, one voice, one quiet act of courage can change everything. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment. When was the moment you stopped being just someone? You belong here. You always have.